today we are going to be talking about city life. And there are a number of things we've already talked about in some of our previous videos. There are things that we're going to be talking about in upcoming videos. Military, politics, we've been talking about religion, we've talked about magic, we've talked about technology. You'll have to look at all the videos to see all the things we've talked about. But when we're getting into city life, this is kind of the zoomed in version of how all of those things start to take shape in the world. And so even though we haven't gotten to all the topics, sometimes what happens when you start zooming in a place like this, at this stage in your world building, it helps you to get a little bit of perspective about things that you still need to work on and things that you've already kind of narrowed down and how you want the world to come together. So I'm going to start out with having Joshua talk a little bit more about city life and give us some framework so that we can get into some of those details.
Are you looking for a new grim, dark steampunk setting to introduce to your players? Well, Dungeon Brew has created a campaign setting manual called Thegum, and it is now available for your support on BackerKit. It has new rules for magic disruption in regions. There are rules to create your own corrupted gods to introduce to your players. There are new rules for mechanics in regards to the firearms for the new steampunk weapons that are being introduced, and there is new magic, new species, new subclasses, new factions, and so much more that's being included in this manual. You can go download a PDF sample on the BackerKit and see what all we have put into it, but right now we need your dice at our table, so head on over. We'll see you there.
That was really well worded. Well said, John. Yeah, there's a lot of things we've talked about already that kind of play into what the city life looks like for your characters as they're stepping into it, and things that we want to consider for the citizens of that city. And this kind of goes back to one of our first initial videos and looking at where our city's placed at and what the climate is like for that city and how that impacts city life. And we may not think about this like right off the get-go, but if you have a city that's along the sea or along a river, if you have it in a strategic location that makes it more defensible, all those things are going to impact how your citizens engage in their day-to-day life, what the things are they do in terms of their hobbies or how they move about the town, and then also the climate itself as well. If you're in a humid environment or if you're in a frigid environment, that's going to change, what time you're going indoors for the evening. If you're sitting around a hearth fire drinking warm tea, or you're sitting outside drinking a cold beer, it's going to determine a lot on how they engage with one another.
Right. Yeah, so it definitely plays a core role in that type of thing, not including appearance, because the closer towards the warmer parts of the world you are, you're probably going to be wearing far different clothing than in the northern climes. So it allows you to visibly change the way that the populace comes across towards the PCs as they're coming into a new area for the first time.
Yeah, especially if the PCs aren't wearing attire that is going to match the rest of the populace.
Right. I see that kind of stuff all the time. How do they know that I'm an American when I walk down the street in London? Well, it has to do with the way that you're dressed. It also has to do with things like your cultural norms and that type of thing, right? What's polite in that society to do. What side of the sidewalk you walk on, or how you interact with passersby, that type of thing. So cultural and appearance type things definitely play a role in how people are perceived, especially NPCs who are going to be traveling around a region they're not familiar with.
And that kind of leads me into the second piece, which is honestly probably the first thing I think of when I'm thinking about city life, and that's politics, laws, and religion, and how those impact the people. When I think of anything that kind of governs the life of individuals, it's usually balanced around politics and law and religion, and those are the things that keep people kind of functioning along the narrow path, so to speak. And so I know you've done this a lot, John, where you have us go into cities as characters, and one of the laws is that we have to have our weapons bound, and we're not allowed to have them out freely. And that really speaks a lot to the city that we're walking in, and it makes it different than other cities we may walk through. I worked for the military for a while, and one of the things that happened a couple of times a day is that you would have the national anthem start playing and everyone has to turn and face the flag on base, which makes that environment very different. You could have a city that has something similar where bells toll and you have to simply face east and pray, or something along those lines. So go ahead.
No, I mean that's right on the money. Those things, especially, again, bringing somebody in new who's not familiar with it, all of a sudden they start hearing bells playing and they're looking around going, I have no idea what that means. And all of a sudden they see people pull out prayer mats and lay them on the ground and everybody's facing the same direction and they're prostrate praying. And you've got the group going, I don't know what's going on. And those things are cultural aspects or religious aspects that come into play when you're looking at city life that definitely affect the way that people view not only the strange people who come in, but the way that you would view the city that you're going into.
And if we're looking at this in line of like our Egypt, Greek theme that we've had overall, you know, they had slaves that were in the cities, and there were certain rules you had around how you could treat those slaves, and it was different from city-state to city-state on what the specific laws were and how you could engage. And you could really look into Greek history and play with that a lot in terms of building that type of world out.
Yeah, slavery was very common throughout most of the Mediterranean and for centuries thereafter. So it could be a very big piece of a number of cities, but it's also something that didn't exist universally. So it's also the type of thing where, again, culturally, it comes across as very strange or very crass if you're coming from an area that doesn't have it, or it could come across as just alien if you are from an area that traditionally does have slaves and you go into a region that does not, and trying to understand how their economics work when they don't have this source of labor that you're used to in the society that you come from.
Yep, I love how you're just giving me these steps being stones right into the next piece, because the third one is resources and trade is what I like to think about. And this really has a lot to do. We haven't talked about economy at the making of this video, but we're going to be talking about it soon. But the economy, the resources, the trade have so much to do with how people of that environment work from day to day. Whether it's the whaling industry, or they're harvesting silver, or they're out in the fields, growing corn each day, or picking cotton, or whatever it is. It has so much to do with city life and how their world revolves, because honestly, the life of the city oftentimes comes out of the economy.
Yeah, it also affects cultural norms. You're talking about the Mediterranean. The primary source of fat is going to be from olive oil. They have a huge fishing industry, and they eat a lot of things like that. And then you're talking about in the north, if you're talking about like Norse cultures, a lot of their fat is actually going to come from animal fat. So they're not going to have access to the same types of common foods, but it affects the appearance of those people. Colder climate people, and specifically we're talking about like Norse. They're usually taller, more heavily muscled, that type of thing, because of the climate that they're in, versus Mediterranean, who are not quite as stout because they're eating different foods. And you can see the same thing if you're talking about Eastern Asian cultures and their stature in comparison to other peoples around the world. Thinking about those things, think about location in relation to diet and other things like that, can affect the way that people actually look.
The fourth thing would probably be the history of the city. Have they had a number of fires because of the culture? Has there been a plague that's gone through? Earthquakes, is war something they're regularly having to deal with? I mean, in Greece, city-states oftentimes were warring with one another. And then also just how old is the city? How long has it been in existence? Which I've noticed, if you visit cities that are really old, that have been around for quite a while, the people there have a much different attitude about the world and their perception of it and their place in it when the city has more history.
Yeah, you hear that all the time, where especially if you're visiting European cities that have been long-standing, Oregon, Asian cities, or Middle Eastern cities, those ones that have been around for millennia, and you walk into the city and you can kind of feel and sense that age and that gravitas that comes along with a city that has been there and withstood the tale of time for such a long time.
And this last one I want to bring up, even though I'm bringing it up last, it might be the most forefront piece that you bring up, or at least bring to the characters' attentions or the PC's attentions when they're walking through, and that's current events. I mean, when we're talking about where your city's placed and the politics and the laws and the religion and the history of it, those are all like underlining things that the characters eventually come to learn about. But current events is usually what's slapping them in the face the moment they're walking through the gates. It has to do with rumors that are going about, a festival that's now blooming where there's just like bright colors and dancing and people dressed up moving about the city. Maybe there's a lot of complaints about immigrants moving into the city that's causing them to have scarce resources and causing them to work extra hours out in the field. Or maybe there's new technology or some sort of prevalence of magic that's taking place that's impacting the current welfare of the people within that city. But current events is usually the thing that is, even though I'm bringing it up last, it's one of the things that the characters themselves are first kind of having thrown at them to face and have to deal with.
Yeah, I think that's true, and that should change each time they go to the city. If they go to the city and come back in a month, there should be a different topic on everybody's tongues about what is exactly going on. You always have the underlying aspects of the other things we've been talking about, but what is most prevalent is the stuff that's going on most recently. That's flavor of the month type stuff, and that is something that is reflective in our own society very easily seen most of the time.
And honestly, you can have a lot of fun with this. Like, I think sometimes city life is thought about as being a dull piece. We all have like that generic fantasy setting that we walk into with the carts rolling by, pulled by the oxen, and the teller on the side yelling the latest news, and the merchant trying to sell us, some sort of shell or something that they pulled out of the ocean, and the barkeep and that type of thing. But you can really make cities unique with the laws that you put down and the mannerisms of the citizens, the culture that's there, and the current events that are taking place to really bring it into a place of intrigue that draws the characters in and go, man, this place is really unique. It's different. I've never been in a place like this before. I want to stay around and explore more and see what's going on. And I think that really is the meat of a lot of campaigns, is when you can bring up a city that's just like, I have never seen anything like this before. I want to explore more.
And if you really want, a crash course in how to do that well, I would recommend looking at Robert Jordan's introductions to any city that he had anybody visit. You go into Carrion, you go into Tyr, you go to, trying to think, Tarvalin. Any of those, the cities feel different. Like, there is a definite sense. If you go to Carrion, you have the shack huts on the outside where all the peasant classes, and once you get into the city walls, everything is in straight, rigid lines all the way through. Everything's in a grid because it is reflective of the type of people who live there. The peasant classes have a certain freedom that they exude in the way that they interact with people, and then you have the noble classes and the merchants or tradesmen who interact with them, who are required to have a certain stateliness and a certain stoicism associated with them. And the depiction of that city is so at odds with every other city that he creates. And it's not just that city versus the others, it's every other city versus every other city. There is a sense of those cities being different and being unique based off of all of the factors that come into world building. So it's a little bit of a push for Jordan's works there, but if you're looking for descriptions of cities, it is an excellent place to start in just trying to make sure that those cities do feel unique based off of the factors like religion, culture, history, and all of the other things that we've been talking about.
So hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. Please let us know what unique things you've done with your own cities, unique laws or politics or designs or cultural pieces you've added into your own cities that was just accepted really well by your players.
Dungeon Brew.